The crack of his palm against her cheek echoed like a gunshot in the dimly lit bedroom, the force snapping her head sideways and sending a spray of blood from her split lip onto the pristine white sheets. Elena's vision blurred, stars exploding behind her eyelids, but she didn't cry out. Not a whimper. Not even a gasp. She clamped her jaw shut, tasting the metallic tang of her own blood. Her body going rigid against the mattress as if silence could armor her against the next blow. Mark loomed over her. His face twisted in a mask of rage, veins bulging in his neck like cords ready to snap. "You think you can question me? In my own house?" His voice was a low growl, whiskey-soured breath hot against her face. But Elena stayed silent, her eyes locked on the ceiling fan whirring lazily above, its blades slicing through the humid air like indifferent scythes. Inside, a storm raged, fury coiling in her chest, humiliation scorching her skin, but outwardly she was a statue, unyielding. The guests downstairs, laughing over dessert, would never know. Not yet. It had started earlier that evening, the betrayal gnawing at her like a hidden rot. Elena had found the messages on his phone 2 days ago, buried in a folder labeled Work Notes. Innocent enough until she scrolled through the chain with Lila, her best friend of 15 years, the woman who'd stood beside her at their wedding, toasting to eternal love. The texts were explicit, filthy even, laced with plans for stolen afternoons in cheap motels on the edge of town. "Can't wait to feel you again," Mark had written. Elena's clueless. Clueless. The word had stabbed deeper than any knife, twisting in her gut as she pictured them together. Lila's manicured hands on his chest, his lips on her neck. Heartbreak crashed over her like a wave, drowning her in waves of resentment. How long? Why? Was it the thrill, the power? Or had their marriage always been this fragile, a facade built on lies? She'd confronted him that night, after the dinner party had wound down to coffee and idle chatter. The guests, Mark's colleagues from the firm, their wives draped in pearls and forced smiles, were still milling about the living room, the clink of glasses and murmurs of conversation filtering up the stairs. Elena had waited until they were alone in the bedroom, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I know about Lila," she'd said, holding up his phone like evidence in a trial. Mark's eyes had widened for a split second, a flicker of guilt, before hardening into denial. "What the hell are you talking about? You're paranoid." But she pressed on, her words tumbling out in a rush of accumulated pain. "The messages, the hotels, how could you? With her?" That's when the mask cracked. He snatched the phone, his face flushing crimson, and before she could react, his hand flew. Now, as he paced the room, muttering curses under his breath, Elena lay still, her mind fracturing into shards of emotion. Anger pulsed through her veins, hot and unrelenting, urging her to scream, to fight back. But humiliation held her tongue, the shame of being the fooled wife, the one left in the dark while he paraded his success downstairs. Heartbreak whispered memories of better times. Their honeymoon in Italy, lazy mornings tangled in sheets, promises whispered in the dark. Had it all been a lie? Resentment built like a pressure cooker. Resentment toward him for his weakness, toward Lila for her treachery, toward herself for not seeing it sooner. She imagined confronting Lila, slapping her across the face, watching her crumble. Or better yet, exposing them both, texting the messages to the entire guest list downstairs. But doubt crept in. What if they turned on her? Called her unstable, hysterical? Mark was the charismatic lawyer, the one with the power. She was just the homemaker, the supportive spouse. He stopped pacing, his shadow falling over her like a shroud. "You say a word to anyone, and I'll make sure you regret it," he hissed, his voice laced with that manipulative edge she'd come to recognize. "We're hosting brunch tomorrow with the partners. Act normal, or I'll tell them you're having another episode." The word dripped with condescension, referencing the anxiety attacks she'd suffered after her mother's death 2 years ago. He'd used it against her before, twisting her vulnerability into a weapon. Guilt flickered in his eyes for a moment, perhaps a remnant of the man she'd married, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by cold resolve. He straightened his tie, smoothed his hair, and headed back downstairs, leaving her alone in the suffocating silence. Elena rolled onto her side, the pillow muffling her ragged breaths. The room felt alive with sensory details. The faint scent of his cologne lingering on the air, the cool silk of the sheets against her bruised cheek, the distant hum of laughter from below like a mocking chorus. She touched her lip, wincing at the swell, and stared at the nightstand clock. 11:47 p.m. The guests would leave soon, trickling out into the night, oblivious to the fracture upstairs. Obsession took root then, a dark vine wrapping around her thoughts. Revenge. The word echoed in her mind, seductive and terrifying. Not impulsive, not loud. Something calculated, something that would make him suffer as she had. Fantasies bloomed, slipping something into his drink, watching him choke in front of everyone, or forging evidence of his embezzlement at the firm. She knew where he hid the files. But moral conflict clawed at her. Was she capable of that? Crossing into darkness, becoming the monster he accused her of being. She rose slowly, her body aching, and moved to the bathroom mirror. The reflection stared back, swollen lip, a bruise blooming purple under her eye like a storm cloud. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away, replacing them with resolve. Planning began in fragments. The brunch tomorrow, the guests arriving at 10 a.m. Mark's partners, their wives, all witnesses to his perfect life. What if she shattered that illusion? Subtle hints first, a misplaced phone, an anonymous tip. But no, it needed to be undeniable, a strike to his core. Fear mingled with excitement. What if he retaliated? Hit her again or worse? Yet the resentment won out, fueling her. She washed her face, the cold water shocking her senses, and slipped back into bed, feigning sleep when Mark returned hours later, reeking of scotch. The night stretched on, a slow burn of inner turmoil. Elena lay awake, her mind a whirlwind of denial. Maybe the messages were a joke, a misunderstanding, and doubt. Could she really go through with it? But each replay of the slap hardened her. By dawn, the plan crystallized. She'd use his own secrets against him, turning the morning into a stage for his downfall. The house creaked in the quiet, the first light filtering through curtains like a promise of reckoning. She closed her eyes, silence her ally, waiting for the guests to arrive. As the sun rose, Elena moved through the kitchen like a ghost, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with a metallic scent of blood still faint on her tongue. Mark slept upstairs, oblivious. His snores a rhythmic reminder of his complacency. She prepared the brunch spread. Croissants from the bakery, fruit platters glistening with dew, eggs Benedict simmering on the stove. Every action was deliberate, a mask of normalcy over the churning obsession beneath. Her thoughts raced the hidden folder on his laptop, the emails detailing not just the affair but shady deals at the firm, kickbacks from clients buried in coded language. She'd glimpsed them once, dismissed them as work stress. Now they were ammunition. The doorbell chimed at 10:05, pulling her from her reverie. She smoothed her dress, applied concealer to the bruise with practiced precision, and opened the door. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady, a smile plastered on like wallpaper. The partners filed in, Mr. Hargrove with his booming laugh, Mrs. Simmons clutching a bottle of mimosa mix, chatting about the previous night's success. "Mark outdid himself with that presentation," Hargrove said, clapping her on the shoulder. Elena nodded, suppressing the resentment bubbling up. "He's still getting ready. Coffee." Upstairs, Mark stirred, his head pounding from the hangover. He glanced at the empty side of the bed, a twinge of guilt surfacing before he shoved it down. She'd stay silent, she always did. He dressed quickly, the crisp shirt and tie restoring his armor, and descended the stairs to greetings and backslaps. Elena watched from the kitchen, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. The tension coiled tighter, subtle hints emerging, a lingering glance at his phone on the counter, her fingers itching to unlock it. Conversation flowed, stock tips, vacation plans, but beneath it, her mind plotted. During a lull, she excused herself, slipping into his study. The laptop hummed to life, password guessed from years of observation. Files opened, emails forwarded anonymously to the partners' inboxes. Her heart hammered, fear whispering warnings, but cold resolve pushed her forward. Back in the dining room, plates clinked, laughter rang out. Mark raised a toast. To new beginnings. Elena met his eyes, her smile ablaze. The first email notification pinged on Hargrove's phone. He frowned, checking it. Then another. The room's atmosphere shifted, subtle at first, a quiet unease. Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his face draining of color. Pale as death, he stared at the screen, the betrayal dawning. Elena watched, her silence breaking inwardly into a storm of vindication. Mark's hand trembled as he set down his fork, the clatter echoing unnaturally loud in the suddenly hushed dining room. The guests exchanged puzzled glances, the air thick with the scent of hollandaise sauce and brewing tension. Elena sipped her coffee, her expression serene, but inside, obsession thrummed like a live wire. Finally, the payoff, the justice she'd fantasized through the sleepless night. Hargrove cleared his throat, his phone screen glowing accusingly. "Mark, what's this email?" "Something about client funds." The words hung heavy, laced with suspicion. Mark's face, already ashen, turned a ghostly white, beads of sweat forming on his brow despite the cool morning breeze wafting through the open windows. It was poetic, really, the way his world unraveled in front of the very people he sought to impress. Elena had timed it perfectly. The forward sent from an anonymous account she'd created in the study, linking to the incriminating emails. Not just the affair with Lila, though she'd included a screenshot of those messages for good measure, but the embezzlement scheme, siphoning small amounts from client accounts to fund his double life. Motels, gifts, weekends away. The evidence was damning, pieced together from fragments she'd gathered over months of quiet observation. Guilt flickered in her now, a moral shadow. Was this too far? Destroying his career, his reputation. But resentment drowned it out. He had beaten her, betrayed her, reduced her to silence. This was balance, cold and calculated. Mark stammered, his voice cracking for the first time Elena could remember. It's a mistake. Someone's hacking my account." But the lie fell flat, his eyes darting to her like a cornered animal. The guests shifted uncomfortably, Mrs. Simmons whispering to her husband, "Should we call the police?" The word police sent a jolt through Elena, unintended consequences blooming like weeds. She hadn't planned for that, only exposure, humiliation to match her own. Fear gripped her. What if they traced the emails back to her? Moral conflict raged anew. Revenge felt justified in the abstract, but here in the flesh it was messy, gray. Had she become the betrayer? Flashbacks assaulted her as the room tensed. Their first date, Mark's shy smile over candlelight, the proposal on a rainy beach, promises of forever. Heartbreak twisted afresh. How had it soured? His ambition, her isolation after quitting her job to support him. Lila's envy, perhaps, fueling the affair. Layered motivations unraveled in her mind. Mark's wasn't just lust, but escape from the pressure of partnership, the facade of perfection cracking under weight. And Lila, betrayal born of insecurity, stealing what wasn't hers. Elena's own role haunted her. Had her silence enabled it all? Doubt crept in, but the sight of him paling, crumbling, fueled her resolve. Hargrove stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor like nails on a chalkboard. "These look real, Mark. Dates, amounts, it's all here." He held up his phone, the screen a damning exhibit. Mark lunged for it, but Hargrove pulled back, his face hardening. "Explain yourself." The dialogue escalated, natural and raw. I can fix this," Mark pleaded, sweat soaking his collar. "It's not what it looks like." Elena interjected softly, her voice a velvet trap. "Is it though? Or is it exactly what it looks like?" The guests gasped, turning to her. Mark's eyes widened in realization. Betrayal reflected back at him. You did this. His whisper was hoarse, laced with suppressed rage. The tension peaked, slow-burn suspense igniting into confrontation. Elena rose, her hands steady despite the inner storm. You hit me last night, Mark. Because I found out about Lila. The confession hung, shocking the room into silence. Mrs. Simmons covered her mouth, horror in her eyes. Mark's pallor deepened, guilt warring with fury. She's lying, he spat, but his voice wavered. Elena pulled back her sleeve, revealing the bruise, vivid purple against her skin, a sensory testament to the violence. The guests murmured, the atmosphere electric with judgment. Hargrove dialed his phone. I'm calling the authorities. Panic surged in Elena. This wasn't the plan. Exposure, yes. Arrest, no. Unexpected consequences loomed. Investigations uncovering her forgery of the anonymous account. Her own moral grayness exposed. Obsession had blinded her to the fallout. Mark slumped in his chair, defeated. His cold resolve shattered. But then a twist. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from Lila. In his haste, he opened it aloud. Babe, the money's transferred. Can't wait for Paris. The room froze. Elena hadn't sent that. Lila had, unwittingly sealing his fate. Poetic justice, unscripted. As sirens wailed in the distance, Elena stepped back, the weight of her actions crashing down. Heartbreak mingled with triumph. Resentment giving way to hollow victory. Mark met her eyes one last time, pale and broken. Why? She whispered, for his ears only. Because you made me silent. Now hear the truth. The door burst open, officers entering, but the real reckoning was internal. Her revenge complete, yet tainted by the grey shadows of doubt and unintended pain. In the aftermath, as guests departed in whispers, Elena stood alone in the kitchen, the sun casting long shadows across the uneaten brunch. Guilt lingered, a quiet companion, but so did resolve. Betrayal had birthed this, and in its wake she was free, scarred but unbroken. The story ended not in glory, but in the psychological echo of what revenge truly costs.